Hello, welcome back to the workshop and to a video inspired by one of my patrons. Hello Simon. So Simon got in touch with me on behalf of his daughter who wants to do a school project on blacksmithing. So to begin, we'll discuss some ideas that I have for the most basic but functional forging setup, and then we'll put that setup together and then use that, just that, to make some small project. When coming up with ideas for this video, I've been very conscious about budget or lack of budget. Now I'm assuming that Simon's daughter, being a teenager, doesn't have much money to throw at this. But I'm also thinking about other people that might want to get into blacksmithing. They don't necessarily want to chuck a huge amount of money at it just to get going. One of the great things about blacksmithing is you don't actually need much to get started. At its heart, blacksmithing is the process of heating up metal and then shaping it into whatever shape you want. So we're going to need a heat source, and we're going to need a hammer, something to hammer against, and something to hold the metal while we're hammering it. Two of those things you're going to have to buy, but two of them I think we can make. Let's talk about tools. We'll start with PPE. What we've got here is some welding gauntlets, some heavy duty rigger gloves, ear defenders and safety glasses. So if you're around hot sparks, be it from an angle grinder or from a forge, you need eyewear. I mean, that's that's beyond debate. Personally, I'll always wear ear defenders, partly because, surprisingly perhaps, I don't actually like loud noises, but also I find that ear defenders, that isolation from the world, helps me concentrate, and I often end up wearing these all day long. Now, PPE, personal protective equipment, is of course vital, but just as important as wearing it is wearing it appropriately. So for instance, you might think that welding gauntlets would be the best thing to, well, use when you're welding, for instance, but I don't, because they actually make me really clumsy, so I tend not to use those. I will, however, use them if I'm trying to do something like hold a chisel over some hot work. Most of the time I stick with these riggers, and these are particularly good ones. These are Predator brand. These are the best ones that I've found over the years. Important safety consideration: when I'm forging, I'll wear one glove. So the glove goes on the hand that holds the tongs, and then I swing the hammer barehanded, and that's because it's much safer. Well, it's also much easier to control a hammer if you're barehanded, but it's also safer. You can get a better grip on the handle if you're not wearing gloves. While we're talking about hammers, this is my current favourite. This is a cross-peen hammer, and I've just noticed actually that I've been using it so much over the years, it's actually started to mushroom at the end. Now I'm a stickler for the right hammer, and this is that, but also a ball-peen hammer is perfectly acceptable for forging as well. What you don't want is to be using a claw hammer. This is the wrong hammer. This is for carpentry. It's not just the type of hammer, it's the weight of the hammer that's really important as well. If you're a novice, you're not going to be able to swing a big hammer, not with any kind of accuracy. So if you can't hold a big hammer like this at the end of the handle and swing it, get a small hammer and work up, because accuracy is just as important as raw power when it comes to blacksmithing. Actually, no, it's not. It's way more important. Quite often when you're forging, you're able to hold one end of a piece of metal and work on the other end, but not always. At some point you're going to come across a bit of metal that's too short to do that with, and you're going to need something to hold it with. So I've got some tongs, and these are really nice. Well, I really like them, but they're really badly made. They're some Victorian tongs that I found in a reclamation yard, and I was lucky enough to find these when I first started out, and they've done me well ever since. Occasionally they fall apart and I have to put them back together, but they are essentially still going strong. Tongs are a lot harder to come by than hammers, so I've had a little think about some substitutes. So when it comes to substitutes for real tongs, people often go for these. This is what I would call mole grips. They're also called vice grips, or self-locking pliers, I suppose is their proper name. They're not great for forging, and I'll try and show you why. So you can put in your workpiece, lock it in place, but once you've locked it, it's locked. If I squeeze hard on the handles here, I'm not doing anything other than what the tool is already doing. So that means it can shake itself loose quite easily. So if you contrast that to me gripping here, you can see I've got loads of leverage on these handles, or reins as they're properly called. And the harder I grip here, the tighter it grips here, unlike with the self-locking pliers. The other sort that you might come across are these are adjustable pliers. These are incredibly useful for all sorts of things. Not so useful for this, simply because the jaws are cranked. So that means when you're holding the thing you're trying to hammer, you're at an odd angle. It's doable, but not great. This is what I would recommend. So these are called slip joint pliers, and they look like just big fat pliers, which I guess they are, but they're also somewhat adjustable. So I've got a couple of pairs of these. I've got these ones which normally live on the tractor, and then I've got these ones which are really nice. I wouldn't use these for forging, they're, they're much too posh. They would do the job, but you wouldn't want to risk transmitting any heat into the jaws of these because they'll lose their temper. And these particular ones, these Knipex or Knipex or Knipex, the pronunciation changes depending where you're from. These are too posh for forging. For work holding over the anvil, if you can't get hold of proper tongs like these ones, my suggestion then would be some slip joint pliers like these, and Cheap and Cheerful is absolutely fine for this application. The other type of work holding is putting something in a vise. This is a big fat bench vise and it's brilliant, and these can be had quite cheaply. I've also got the leg vise. Leg vise is also brilliant, much harder to find though. For starting out though, any vise is better than no vise, and that's what we've got here. Cheap and nasty vise that I've never actually used. I've had this for as long as I can remember and never actually used it. This is a bench vise. It's a portable bench vise, I guess. You can attach it to whatever you've got. So we'll be attaching this to Workmate and seeing how we get on. I think it'll be okay. Let's talk about power tools, and you don't really need any. Having said that, they are super useful. A cordless drill, I'm sure I don't need to explain how versatile a cordless drill is. An angle grinder is also surprisingly versatile. You can grind with it, and by swapping the discs you can cut with it as well, and you can sand with it, and you can use a wire brush on it. Like I say though, not essential. You can get by with a hacksaw and some files. It's just a lot more work. My top tip for a hacksaw is to get loads of high quality blades, and as soon as a blade dulls, chuck it and put a new one in. It's hard enough work as it is. And the only other thing I'd say is super important are some chisels and drifts and punches, that sort of thing. And these yellow ones I actually picked up as a whole set, very cheaply. They were branded as Stanley. This kit here then is what I'd recommend for a starting blacksmith. And to prove it's all you need, I'll try and stick to this for the rest of the video. Our heat source is going to be a forge. Now I've got two forges. I've got the gas forge over there, and just outside here I've got the solid fuel forge. The gas forge has got the advantage of being convenient and easy to use, but on the other hand it's expensive to build and it's expensive to run. I mean, most of this is just a load of fire bricks that my granddad donated to me years and years ago, but this part, the actual burner, that was about 70 or 80 quid. And of course it's running on propane, which that just goes up every time I try and buy any. A solid fuel forge on the other hand can be built for next to nothing, and if you make your own charcoal, the running cost is zero. This one I cobbled together out of scrap about 15 years ago. It's still going strong. The only thing I actually paid for was this bouncy castle blower, and I got that off eBay for £10 if I remember correctly. So it's a solid fuel forge we're going for, and this is going to be our starting point. It's the cheapest barbecue I could find on eBay. It cost me £20. As an air source, I picked up this also off eBay. This was about £12 I think. And this is a little 12 volt fan with variable speed. It looks bigger in the photos. Let's get this built up then, and then we'll see what we can do about turning it from a barbecue into a forge. Well, for 20 quid you do actually get a fair amount of raw material. Now, this wasn't my first idea for building a forge. Initially I was just going to go and raid the scrap pile, but then it occurred to me that not everyone has got the same stockpile of raw materials that I have. Then I thought maybe I could build a forge out of breeze blocks, and that would be quite straightforward to do, but the issue then, well, apart from the fact that probably most people don't have a pile of breeze blocks in their garden either, it's not going to be portable, is it? It's going to be fixed in place. But then when I discovered these barbecues, or ones like this, are readily available for 20-25 quid, well, that seemed like a no-brainer, so here we are. Brought you back out here to the solid fuel forge just to go over the basic principles of operation. So we've got a blower that scoops up air, chucks it up this pipe, and here we come into a T-junction, and the air can only go up, and it comes through the fuel and makes it burn much more fiercely, nice and hot, what we want. So we need a blower, we need a grate in the bottom of the fire, and some way of connecting the blower to that grate. Before we go any further, let's see if we can get any life out of this cheapo blower. I've not tested this yet, but I did have to chop off the plug that came with it and put a UK one on there. This looks to be like that's an American plug, isn't it? Fortunately, this is universal voltage on here, so it doesn't matter if we chuck 100 volts or 240 in there. It will dole out 12 according to this. The reason I bought this, despite what it looks like, the reason I've got it is because it's got this motor controller, which I think will be useful. But it all depends if the tiny little blower here has got enough puff. This may all be a waste of time. The other substitute, of course, would be something like a hairdryer, but I don't have a hairdryer. Oh, that is full beams. This is on par with a hairdryer, I'd say. Yeah. Have I even used a hairdryer? I can't remember. Well, it works anyway, so that's good. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to pillage through my scrap pile looking for bits, but here we are. If you don't have a scrap pile of your own, there are still car breakers about where you can get useful things like what I'm about to show you. A brake drum and a brake disc. You can also pick up things like little bits of exhaust pipe and stuff like that, which we can use to connect the blower to the bottom of the forge. Or, what I've just found here, a handle. What I'm thinking is to cut this somewhere along there, and then this bit here will sit at the bottom of one of these. The reason we need something like this is to take the brunt of the force, stop it just going onto that flimsy shell of the barbecue. Incidentally, a Land Rover brake drum makes an excellent forge all by itself if you've got access to welding equipment. So what I've done before is make up a sort of assembly out of box section, I think it was, that dropped in there, had a T-junction on it, goes to a blower, put this on legs or a frame or something, off you go. But this time around I'm trying to make do without any welding. So we'll probably put that to one side, and at the bottom of the forge barbecue we'll put this. So a scrapyard where you actually weigh in metal, is a useful resource because they'll generally sell you the scrap at by weight, and that can be a dead handy way of picking up bits and bobs. Vehicle breakers is useful in other ways, like I've just shown you. Another really useful resource if you want small bits of metal for forging is to make friends with your local welder fabricator, and they're all over the place. And what you'll find there is that next to their chop saw they'll have a bin of little offcuts, and that's what I used to get started in blacksmithing. The place I worked at, all this stuff would just go to scrap, and they just let me take home a bucket every now and again, and then I'd forge away doing bits of practice. Well, let's take these up and see what we can do with them. That's just going to be too flimsy. Put that there. There's already a lot of holes in the bottom here, but they're all wrong. So I need some way of opening this up. I'm going to have to add some tools. Tin snips. Through there. In this disc we've got the holes where the wheel studs would go, but also these smaller holes drilled in it. One of those will match up with that. So with a little ditty bolt, I'm going to go through there. I reckon that go there. That goes in there. So now we've got to blow onto that somehow. Oh, it's nearly there. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to duct tape it. So the precise details of what I'm doing here are of course not terribly important, because it all depends what bits and bobs you find lying around. So there we go, this is going to be the air intake, and then this is going to be the half. And this should... and then on there. The final bit of kit we're going to need is an anvil. This is my anvil, and as you can see it's just a big lump of metal on top of a big lump of wood. This happens to be a really nice anvil. You don't need anything like this to start out with. In fact, I went for many years with something much more modest. And you don't even need your anvil to be anvil shaped. Although I do love this shape, I must say this is a London pattern anvil, and it's one of those things that's just evolved over hundreds of years to be the shape it is. Each part of the anvil's got a different use, but we don't really have to worry about any of that. We just need a big lump of metal and a big lump of wood to put it on. If you can't find or can't afford an anvil shaped anvil, I've got a couple of suggestions. Here's one. This is a 56-pound weight. It's the sort of thing you use with very old weighing scales for weighing sacks of potatoes and things. They can still be had, they can still be found about. This one, all I did with it was radius off the edges a bit, and I use this as a straightening block to straighten or put curves in bits of steel. But this would make an excellent anvil. It's nice and lumpy and it's got some shapes on it as well, which you could also utilise. So that would be a great anvil. Obviously these aren't that easy to find. Another great starting point for do-it-yourself anvils is a bit of railway track, and here on the power hammer both the hammer head and the anvil are made from railway track. You can use it pretty much as is, like I've done here, or what I did once was using a grinder and a cutting torch, I carved a bit of railway track into a London pattern anvil like this one. It took me ages, but it looked really cute. Much more common, and the thing I'm going to suggest next, is a sledgehammer. I found this one and we're going to use this. So the advantage of this is it's, well, very easy to find. These are everywhere. I mean, you can pick them up at car boot sales for, I'm guessing here, but next to nothing. It's got some shapes that we can use, and it's got a hole in the middle, and that's really useful. Now, of course, the downside of the sledgehammer head is it's not as heavy as this thing, and it's not as heavy as a real anvil, but I think we can make this work. The upside, of course, is that these are very easy to find. I recently remounted my anvil on this nice new stump of wood, and what that means is we can use the old stump to mount this one. This is the block that the anvil used to be mounted on, and these are the staples that held it down. We'll have to make some of those in a bit. I pulled these ones out just to show you that anything will do in a pinch, and these are all just bits of firewood. This is all just scrap, but bigger is better. As with the anvils themselves, bigger is better, so we'll stick with this one. All we need to do is make some staples that are going to pin this into place. These ones I had to cut up to get them out. They were so well embedded, but no problem. We'll make some new ones, and it'll be a good chance to fire up the forge and, well, see if it works. What we've got here is an extremely old bag of charcoal briquettes that somebody gave me years and years ago, and this is lumpwood charcoal. I've always poo-pooed the briquettes as being nowhere near as good, but we're going to try them and see if that's actually the case. Now this little bag of charcoal cost a £5, so this is going to get quite an expensive hobby if you get into it, unless you make your own charcoal. Catch. It's going to work. Yeah. This is the first time I've ever bought charcoal. Now, of course, I've got no idea what this charcoal is made of, but whatever it is, it's popping and fizzing a lot more than I'm used to with the charcoal I make myself. So, of course, safety glasses are on. Well, the heart of that's getting nice and warm. We'll chuck these in. Turn it up a bit. This bucket of water is for quenching, but also if I get a burn, I can just stick my hand straight in there. It's also for quenching, I suppose. Yeah, this is going to be hard work. can see there I've just put a square taper on each end of the pin. Put the back in. I'm just going to use this as a former. So I've got two sets of pliers. I'm going to pull it out and just wrap it round that sledgehammer head. More central this time. Pilot these holes. Good. Okay, well now we have a functioning smithy, let's make something. So I'm going to use the rest of that 6mm round. We'll get some more fuel in there and we'll make a little project. Try out the briquettes. So you can see that the lump wood was great, but it didn't last very long. That was half that packet gone, just making those little staples. Let's see what this stuff looks like. We're going to make a coat hook, and the first thing I'm going to do is to punch a hole in the end of the hook, where you'll put a nail or a screw into the wall to hang it up. To punch the hole, I'm going to use a punch, and I'm also going to use a bolster plate. A bolster plate is simply a lump of steel with some holes drilled in it. That's literally all it is. And I can put this over the hole in our anvil and we can make a nice precise hole in the lump of steel there. Just before I do that, I'm going to have to flatten it out a bit at the end. We need a wire brush, that's another essential tool. Yeah, that top little bit there, I'm going to twist. Now we need to cut it off. Here's where we are so far. So now we need to taper this end, and what I'm going to do is to bring it out into a flat taper and then roll it up a little bit, and then we'll turn that into a hook shape. This is what I use on most of my work to finish it off. So it's just beeswax in terps. Cool down. There we are, the most ultra basic blacksmithing smithy I could think of, up and running, and we've even made a little trinket. I hope that inspires a few of you out there to have a go yourselves. The charcoal briquettes performed about the same as the lumpwood charcoal, but it was quite poor lumpwood charcoal. Either way, using the store-bought charcoal is going to get expensive pretty quick, so I'm going to show you a couple of ways of making charcoal at home. But that's for the next video. Cheers for now.